Welcome to Positive Voices. Please like and subscribe Positive Voices. Let's begin. I remember the moment like it just happened. My name is Lindsay, I'm 32 years old, and honestly, I don't know what I was thinking. I was sitting in the kitchen, casually chatting with my sister Danny about something I probably shouldn't have said out loud. You know when you vent a little too much, and realize later you should have kept your mouth shut? Yeah, that's me. I don't think I meant for him to overhear it, but maybe deep down I didn't care enough to keep my voice down either. I told Danny that if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't date Derek, my husband. I said it so flippantly, like it was no big deal, as if I was talking about a bad haircut instead of the man I promised to spend my life with. I don't even know why I said it. Maybe I was feeling bored, or maybe I just wanted her sympathy. Derek wasn't even doing anything wrong at the moment. He was in the other room, probably scrolling through his phone like he always does when he's winding down after work. But I said it, and then the silence hit me. It wasn't Danny's silence. She's used to my dramatic outbursts. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air suddenly shifts. I turned my head just enough to see him standing in the doorway. He didn't say anything. He didn't yell, didn't ask me to explain, didn't even look angry. He just looked at me for a second, his face blank, and then walked out of the room. The sound of the front door closing behind him made me feel sick. I wasn't expecting that. Honestly, I thought he'd argue, or at least get mad. But leaving, that wasn't his style. Derek's always been the calm one, the patient one, the one who balances out my, let's just call it, energy. I didn't think he'd actually leave though. I mean, it wasn't like I said I hated him or that I was going to leave him. It was just venting, right? Isn't that what people do with their sisters? You say things you don't mean because they get it. They're supposed to. Danny didn't even know what to say. She just looked at me with this wide-eyed expression like she couldn't believe I'd said it either. But instead of admitting I messed up, I doubled down. I laughed it off, said he'll be fine. He's just being dramatic. I don't know why I said that. Maybe because if I admitted I was wrong, I'd have to deal with the guilt, and I didn't feel like doing that in the moment. Hours went by and he didn't come back. I called him once, and when he didn't answer, I texted him, "You okay?" No response. Fine, I thought. If he wanted to pout, that was on him. I wasn't about to beg him to come back over something that wasn't even that serious. But as the night went on, I started to feel this weird mix of anger and panic. Like, how dare he leave me sitting there? But also, where the hell was he? Was he trying to teach me a lesson or what? I stayed up until midnight, scrolling through TikTok and pretending I wasn't waiting for him to walk back through the door. He didn't. By the time I finally went to bed, I was more annoyed than anything else. I told myself he'd come back when he was ready and that I wasn't going to lose sleep over it. Spoiler, I totally did. The next morning, his side of the bed was still empty. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. His shoes still by the door, so it's not like he packed up and left for good. But I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. I texted him again, "Where are you? Can we talk?" Still nothing. At this point, I started to worry. Not because I felt bad, but because I didn't like being ignored. I'm not the kind of person who deals well with the silent treatment. If there's a problem, I need to talk about it, hash it out, and move on. But Derek, he's more of a let it simmer kind of guy, and it drives me crazy. I told Danny about it, and she said, "Maybe you should apologize." Apologize? For what? For being honest? For saying what I was feeling in the moment? I didn't see why I should have to grovel just because he happened to overhear a private conversation. He shouldn't have been eavesdropping, I said, trying to justify it to myself more than to her. But even as the words came out, they felt hollow. By the end of the day, I was starting to get really irritated. Like, who does he think he is, making me stress out like this? If he had a problem with what I said, he could have stayed and talked to me about it like an adult. Instead, he ran off, leaving me to feel like the bad guy. Okay, maybe I am the bad guy. But still, it's not like I said anything that wasn't true. Sometimes I do wonder if I'd be happier if we'd never gotten together. That's not the same as saying I don't love him.
Right.
But as much as I tried to convince myself I was in the right, a small part of me started to wonder if this time I'd pushed him too far. Derek's always been the kind of guy who lets me take the lead, who goes along with whatever I want, even when I know he doesn't always agree. I guess I'd started to take that for granted. I always assumed he'd be there, no matter what. But now, for the first time, I wasn't so sure. The hours kept ticking by, and still no word from him. I tried calling his mom, but she hadn't heard from him either. That's when I started to feel really uneasy. What if he wasn't just mad? What if something had happened to him? But then again, Derek's not the type to get reckless or do something stupid. If anything, he's the most predictable person I know. That's part of what makes him so frustrating sometimes. By the time it got dark, I was spiraling. I didn't know if I should be mad, worried, or just over it. I wanted to text him again, but I didn't want to seem desperate. So instead, I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for it to light up with a message that never came. The next day came and went, and Derek was still gone. I told myself to stay calm, but every time I heard a car outside, my heart jumped. I kept checking my phone, refreshing my texts like an idiot, as if I'd missed his reply somehow. Nothing, not a single word. At this point, my irritation was taking over. Who does that? Who just leaves and doesn't tell their wife where they're going? It was immature, plain and simple. But then, as I sat there staring at my coffee, the thought hit me. What if he was really done this time? Like, what if I had finally pushed him past the point of no return? It wasn't a thought I liked entertaining, but the more I tried to brush it off, the more it stuck. Derek wasn't like this. He didn't do silent treatments or games. If he was gone, there was a reason, and maybe it was bigger than I wanted to admit. Around noon, Danny called to check on me. Have you heard from him yet? She asked, her voice softer than usual, like she was trying not to spook me. No, I snapped, and honestly, it's ridiculous. He's the one making this a big deal, not me. Linz, she said carefully. You kind of made it a big deal first. I wanted to hang up on her. You're supposed to be on my side, I said instead, but even as I said it, I felt a sting of guilt. She wasn't wrong, not entirely. Maybe I had made it a big deal, but it wasn't like I'd planned to hurt him. It was just I didn't think he'd take it that hard. It's not like I told him I was leaving, or that I didn't love him. People vent all the time. He was just being too sensitive. By the time evening rolled around, I'd convinced myself I needed to stop waiting. If he wasn't going to come back on his own, I'd go find him. I called his mom again, but she still hadn't heard from him. I tried a couple of his friends too, but either they were covering for him, or they really didn't know. One of them, Mark, sounded genuinely surprised when I asked if Derek had been in touch. Everything okay with you too? He asked, and I had to bite back the urge to snap at him. Yeah, fine, I said quickly. Just checking. After that, I drove around for an hour, not really knowing where to go. Derek wasn't the type to hang out at bars or crash on a friend's couch without saying anything. He was steady, predictable. So where the hell was he? When I got home, there was still no sign of him. His toothbrush, his shoes, they were like ghosts, reminding me he should have been there. I stood in the kitchen for what felt like forever, staring at the front door and willing it to open. But it didn't. The house was too quiet and I hated it. I started scrolling through our bank account half out of curiosity and half out of desperation to feel like I was doing something. That's when I saw it. A hotel had charged from earlier that day. He wasn't with his mom, or a friend, or a God forbid someone else. He was at a hotel alone. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or furious, so he was okay. But also he was hiding out in some hotel, avoiding me like I wasn't worth talking to. The nerve. I called the hotel immediately. I don't even know what I planned to say if he picked up, but it didn't matter because the desk clerk wouldn't confirm anything. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said in this fake polite tone, but I can't disclose any information about our guests. I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up and started typing out another text. I know where you are, I wrote, my fingers shaking. Can you just stop being childish and come home so we can talk? I stared at the message for a few minutes before deleting it. If he wanted to act like a coward, let him. I wasn't about to beg. Still, the knot in my stomach wasn't going away. I hated this feeling, like I was out of control, like he had the upper hand. Derek was supposed to be the one who chased me, who forgave me, who let me vent and then moved on. That's how it always worked. So, why wasn't it working now? The next morning, I woke up to an empty house again. It was starting to get to me. The silence. The not knowing. I tried to focus on work, but every email felt like a distraction from the real problem. My husband was gone, and I had no idea what to do about it. I kept telling myself it wasn't that serious, that he just needed space, but the longer he stayed away, the harder it was to believe that. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the hotel, not caring how desperate it made me look. If he wasn't going to come to me, I'd go to him. When I got there, the clerk gave me the same spiel about privacy, and I had to fight the urge to cause a scene. "He's my husband," I snapped, but she just smiled that fake customer service smile and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am." Defeated, I walked back to my car. As I sat there, staring at the steering wheel, I started to feel something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Fear. What if he wasn't coming back? What if I'd really pushed him too far this time? And what if, deep down, I knew it wasn't just about what I'd said to Danny? This wasn't the first time I'd let my mouth get ahead of me, and it wasn't the first time I'd put my own feelings ahead of his. Maybe this time, he'd had enough. Still, as much as I hated to admit it, I wasn't ready to apologize. Not yet. I needed to see him first to make sure he was okay to figure out how to spin this in my favor. Because if there's one thing I've always been good at, it's talking my way out of a mess. And this was just another mess, right? I didn't have to wait much longer to see Derek after my failed attempt at the hotel. Late that same evening, the front door finally opened, and there he was. He didn't slam the door or throw his keys down like I might have done in his place. He walked in calmly, almost too calmly, and I couldn't read his expression. That blank look on his face unnerved me. I was ready for a fight, or at least some dramatic response. But this was worse. He set his bag down by the couch and stood there for a moment, looking at me like he was trying to decide what to say. For a second, I thought he might just walk upstairs without a word. But instead, he spoke. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady, almost cold. "Yeah, no kidding." I snapped back, folding my arms across my chest. I was already defensive, even though I knew I should have been the one to apologize. But I wasn't going to start there. I couldn't. It felt like admitting I was wrong would give him some kind of power over me. And I wasn't ready for that. He sat down on the couch, motioning for me to sit too. I stayed standing, leaning against the kitchen counter like I was too busy to care. "You then explain why you ghosted me for 2 days. I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out sharper than I intended. Derek sighed, rubbing his hands together like he was trying to warm them up. "I needed space," he said. "To think. To figure out how to even talk to you after what I heard." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on, Derek. Are we really doing this? You overheard one thing. One thing that I said in private to my sister. And now you're acting like it's the end of the world." "It wasn't just one thing, Lindsay," he said, his voice rising slightly, though he quickly brought it back down. "He said you'd never date me now. That if you could go back, you wouldn't choose me." "Well, maybe I wouldn't." I shot back before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, and for a moment I regretted them. But then I doubled down. "You've changed, Derek. We both know it. You're not the same guy I married." I hesitated, trying to choose my words carefully, but my emotions got the better of me. "You're lazier now, okay? You've let yourself go. You don't even try anymore. Can you really blame me for feeling like this?" He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a real hurt in his eyes. But instead of getting angry, he just nodded slowly like he was expecting this. "So that's it," he said quietly. "You think I'm fat and ugly, and that's why you'd rather not be with me." I rolled my eyes again, trying to brush off the weight of what I just said. "Don't twist my words. I didn't say I didn't want to be with you. I said if I could go back, I might have made a different choice. That's not the same thing." "Sure sounds like it to me," he replied, his voice steady but firm. "And you know what? Maybe you're right. I have changed. I've gotten older. I've gained some weight. I've gotten comfortable. But that's what happens when you're married, Lindsay. You settle into life together. You build a life. Or at least, that's what I thought we were doing." I felt my face flush, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling up inside me. "Don't make this about me," I said, my voice rising. "You think I don't notice how distant you've been, how you barely even talk to me anymore, unless it's about work or bills or what we're having for dinner. You're not exactly giving me a reason to feel excited about this marriage, Derek." "So this is my fault now?" he asked, his tone calm but incredulous. "I'm the reason you're unhappy. The reason you don't respect me enough to keep a conversation like that between you and your sister out of your shot." I threw up my hands in frustration. "You're twisting everything. I'm just saying, maybe if you put in a little more effort, worked out, showed some interest in me like you used to, I wouldn't feel like this." He stared at me for a long moment, and then he did something I didn't expect. He stood up slowly and looked me straight in the eye. "You know what, Lindsay? I think this says more about you than it does about me. What's that supposed to mean? I snapped, feeling a sudden surge of panic. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't fighting back the way I'd expected. He was calm, and somehow that made me feel even smaller. It means, he said, his voice steady, that you don't see what you have. You've got someone who's been here for you, through all of your impulsive decisions, your spending habits, your ups and downs, someone who's never judged you for any of it. And instead of appreciating that, you look for reasons to tear me down. I opened my mouth to respond, but he wasn't done. I know I'm not perfect, I know I've changed, but so have you, Lindsay. And not in a way that makes this marriage easier. You've turned into someone who doesn't take accountability, who lashes out instead of having a real conversation, and who would rather blame me than look in the mirror. His words hit me like a slap, but instead of admitting he might be right, I lashed out again. Oh, so now you're perfect? The saint who's been holding this marriage together while I'm the problem. He shook his head, picking up his bag again. No, I'm not perfect, but at least I'm trying to be better, Lindsay. I'm done standing here and letting you make me feel like I'm not enough. If you can't see the value in me anymore, maybe we need to take a step back. I froze. What are you saying? I'm saying I need more than this, he said, gesturing between us. And if you're not willing to work on it, then maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. He didn't yell, he didn't slam the door on his way out. He just walked out, leaving me standing there, stunned and more confused than ever. Over the next few weeks, reality hit me hard. Derek didn't come back, not even for his mail. Every time I walked into the house, the emptiness felt heavier. It wasn't just that he was gone physically. It was a silence, the absence of his presence that cut the deepest. I started reaching out to him more, trying to test the waters. The responses I got were polite but distant. Hope you're doing okay. I'll come by this weekend to grab my things. That was it. No warmth, no opening for conversation. He wasn't cruel, but it was clear that he was done being vulnerable with me. The weekend came and I dreaded seeing him. When he walked through the door, he looked different. His shoulders seemed broader, his posture straighter. He trimmed his beard and it actually looked good, clean, purposeful. He even smelled different, like he'd started using cologne. I hated to admit it, but he looked better than I'd seen him in years. Hey, I said awkwardly, standing by the kitchen counter as he came in. Hey, he replied, giving me a small nod but nothing more. He didn't ask how I was doing, didn't try to make small talk. Instead, he went straight to the bedroom and started packing his things into boxes. I followed him, unsure of what to say, but desperate to break the silence. Derek, can we talk? I asked, my voice softer than usual. He didn't stop packing. About what? I hesitated. About us? He paused, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What about us, Lindsay? He made it pretty clear how you feel. I didn't mean it like that, I said quickly, stepping closer. I was upset, I wasn't thinking. He shook his head and went back to packing. No, Lindsay. You were thinking. You just didn't think I'd hear it. The lump in my throat grew. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, he said firmly, finally looking at me. And it's not just about that one conversation. It's everything. The way you talk to me, the way you treat me, it's like I'm never good enough for you. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I forced myself to stay composed. I was wrong. I know I was, but we can fix this. We've been through worse, right? He let out a small bitter laugh. Have we? Because I don't think we've ever been through this, Lindsay. I don't think I've ever felt this disrespected, this unwanted. And the worst part? I stayed. I kept trying. Even when you made it clear you didn't appreciate me. That's on me. I let it get this far. His words hit like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't. Deep down, I knew he wasn't. So what? That's it. You're giving up on us? My voice cracked and I hated how desperate I sounded. I'm not giving up, he said, his tone steady. I'm choosing myself for once. I'm done trying to prove my worth to someone who doesn't see it. I stared at him, my mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to forgive me, to tell me we'd figure it out together. But instead, he was standing there, calm and resolved, like he'd already made his decision. I can change, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'll do better, I'll be better. He sighed, setting down the box he was holding. Lindsay, I hope you do. Not for me, but for yourself. But I can't be the one who waits around for you to figure it out. I've spent years trying to make you happy, and all I've gotten in return is criticism and resentment. I deserve better. His words stung more than I thought they would. I felt the tears spill over, and for once I didn't try to hide them. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice breaking. Please, Derek, we can fix this. He looked at me for a long moment, and for a brief second, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pity, maybe, or regret. But then he shook his head. I've already lost too much of myself trying to fix this, he said quietly. I can't do it anymore. He picked up the box and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart shattering into pieces. I wanted to chase after him, to beg him to stay, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. He was done, and for the first time, I realized I might really lose him for good. Over the next few days, I tried to distract myself. I threw myself into work, went out with friends, anything to avoid being alone in the house. But no matter what I did, the emptiness followed me. Derek wasn't just gone physically, he'd taken a piece of me with him. A month later, I saw him again. He was at a coffee shop, sitting at a table with a woman I didn't recognize. She was pretty, not stunning, but she had this natural, effortless kind of beauty. They were laughing and he looked happy. Happier than I'd seen him in years. I wanted to march over there to interrupt their little moment and remind him that I was still his wife. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching from a distance, feeling the weight of my own mistakes. This was my fault. I had pushed him away, torn him down, and now he was moving on without me. When he saw me, his smile faded for a second, but he didn't look angry or upset. He just gave me a small nod, like an acknowledgement, and then went back to his conversation. It was like I was already a memory to him, something he'd moved past. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt the full weight of my choices settle over me. I had spent so much time blaming him, picking at his flaws that I hadn't seen how much he was giving me. And now it was too late. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. And for the first time, I realized that it wasn't Derek who had failed me. It was me.